And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore. We never sit out. We're your hosts, MD and CD. Today, talking more coaching hires. All right. We got Ball State, we got Central Michigan, and we got Temple. Three MAC staples. If you think about it, that's a thinker. That's a thinker right there. We got two FCS coaching hires. We got a guy who was coaching FCS football not more than 3 years ago, also heading to Temple. We got FCS galore today, basically coming up and rising through these ranks. We got interesting offenses. We got interesting athletic directors. We got interesting coaching staffs. We got dynamic conferences. We got some really, really interesting coaching hires today. And I'm none of these really. I'll say Temple's hiring of Casey Keeler is really the only one that excited me, at first glance, if that makes sense. But the more that you look into like some of these other guys, like Urimovich, like Drinkle, you can actually kind of get excited, for some things. And when you look at fit for some of these programs in the MAC, it is extremely important, right? As well as fantastic coaching. There's been some MAC coaches that or successful MAC coaches that have come from the FCS levels, that have had really dynamic offenses, right, or interesting coaching schemes, or really good in game coaching, or just great talent evaluation. Whatever it is, you got to be able to bring something to the table. And I guess our job's to convince you that maybe these guys did or maybe they didn't. So, CD, how are we feeling today?
No, I'm doing good, honestly. Excited. Like you said, these at first glance aren't the most exciting programs or most tantalizing hires that these people made. But the reality is they are important for these conferences. They're important for these fan bases, for these programs. Obviously, the recruits are going to be bringing in. Excited to get into them. Also, it's making us better college football analysts as we are diving into these programs, getting more comfortable and learning the ins and outs, and trying to do the best we can to bring these hires to life and let you guys know exactly what we think about them from doing all of our research. Obviously, we put a lot of work into these, so we do appreciate you guys tuning in, checking us out. Make sure you do make sure you are subscribed, all that kind of good stuff. We will be pumping out plenty more coaching carousel videos in the future, and obviously other stuff getting into the offseason as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. Let's just get into it. All right. Let's talk about Mike Urinovich. Let's talk about him moving to Ball State. Let's talk about Mike New getting out of here, which, by the way, I guess before we talk about Urimovich, let's talk a little bit about Mike New. He was there for 9 years, okay? We've said this many times about the state of Ball State as a program, right? What is the expectation, right? I mean, they've won one bowl game in 30 years, and they did it under Mike New, okay? You've had one coach in the last 30 years come out of Ball State with a winning record, okay? That includes Brady Hoke. So when you ask yourself, hey, who's actually winning here, right? The answer is no one, okay? So Mike New gets canned, but the reality is, like, you have these boosters, right, that are donating money. They're not donating money to the Ball State program to go 4-8, right? To go 3-9, right? They want to make bowl games. They want to compete for conference championships. Ball State is in the bottom half of the MAC, all right, in terms of program resources, program history, right? And until recently, I mean, you would have put Ohio in that category until the last however many years that they've been pretty solid here. But overall, this program being in Indiana, geography doesn't help very much because there just is better talent in the state of Illinois and better talent in the state of Ohio. There's a lot of negatives that are going on for this program that don't put coaches often in a good position to win, right? So Mike New gets canned. And it's not even that he did a terrible job. I mean, I'm sure Ball State fans are like, oh, this guy sucks. But it's like, you look at some of these guys. Yeah, like Pete Lembo was good for you. He came out of there with a winning record. Maybe it didn't end the way that you wanted it to. Brady Hook was awesome for, I guess, 2 years, but he also had a 2-9 season in there as well. Bill Lynch was terrible. I mean, you just have not had good coaches at all. So Urimovich comes in here, okay, and this is the state of this program is not necessarily fantastic. You have conference realignment happening soon. Northern Illinois on the exit, who is historically one of the most dominant teams in this conference, at least in the last 10, 15 years, right? And in comes UMass, who arguably, as you pointed out to me off air, has a lot more resources than some of these other MAC schools, including Ball State. So kind of an eye for an eye right there, kind of a net zero uh, game right there. But I like Urimovich as a coach. I do. And when we're going to talk about him, we're going to talk about it in a positive light. And when we give our grades, we're also going to do these relative to the expectations for Ball State, or at least what Ball State fans we believe should expect. Not that we're going to tell Ball State fans what they should expect, right? But maybe what our idea of Ball State fans should probably expect.
Yes, so Ball State getting that they've only played it in 9 bowl games in their entire, history, right? Which seems extraordinarily low. Now the reality is when they were having their better seasons, right?
It's more than
Paul
Indiana
Shudell,
in that same state.
Paul Shudell, Dwight Wallace, Dave McClain, some of these like better coaches for Ball State in their history, there were a lot less bowl games, and so being bowl eligible did not mean you automatically were going to make a bowl or get invited to a bowl. A lot of that was the MAC ties you had to certain bowl games that were not fantastic, or not a ton of bowl games lining up to take MAC schools. So it sucks, right? But the reality is, we think maybe Urinovich has a chance to do that, and let's talk about him a little bit. So he's coming up from Butler, and the interesting thing about Butler is there's a lot of connection between the two programs. So Muncie to Indianapolis is about 55 miles away from each other, right? So not too far away. So Urinovich is going up to Ball State, and Ball State's, Kevin Lynch is going down to Butler. So Kevin Lynch was the offensive coordinator for Ball State this past season. He's heading back down to Butler to be their head coach to take over for Mike Urinovich. Kevin Lynch has a lot of family history at Butler. His dad, Bill Lynch, is a guy that coached a lot at Butler, at Ball State, Indiana, DePaul. A lot of Indiana ties there. Yeah, so it's obviously a lot of things going on there, but it's just interesting. It's a little factor that I thought I'd throw in there. But yeah, Urinovich was at Butler. He was a guy that honestly, turned them into a pretty solid school in the Pioneer League. 3 straight winning seasons in 2022, they were pretty damn good offensively. And then in 23 and 24, they got even better and better. And that's what Urinovich will be doing. He will be calling plays for this Ball State program. And what he's done there, he's had experience at NIU, which means he understands the MAC. Back when NIU was there in 2018, they won a championship there, MAC championship, which is obviously the goal, the end goal if you're Ball State. Obviously, maybe not the expectation, but the reality is he's had that kind of championship, stuff. He's also born in Gary, Indiana, which is freaking awesome, having the ties to the state there. And then most of his coaching career has been in that Midwest, obviously with Butler too, not far, knows the recruiting ground, knows the high schools, all that kind of stuff. And he signed, a 5-year contract. The details have not been made public yet about what he's making, but New was making about $700K in his 9th year at Ball State. So I would expect something maybe a little bit less than that, especially if you're getting a guy from the FCS. You can save a little money on that, which leads you to have more money to put into your coaching staff there and some other resources, hopefully, that Ball State is able to address and invest in to give Urinovich a chance to succeed in the MAC. When you've got other schools, like you said, like UMass and other schools, NIU, who's obviously leaving soon, but they're getting more and more, investments into that program, and some other schools too that you're just kind of falling behind. And the reality is you're expecting your coaches and you're paying them at a C, D tier rate, but you're not giving them resources to win at a B rate. So obviously, just because you pay someone more doesn't mean they're going to make more money, but it also does help to have those kind of resources to go out and get things that are necessities for your programs to get good and stay good.
Yeah, and us saying this doesn't mean that Ball State can't win, right? We've seen schools all over the country with interesting geography, right? Build their way up to become, sort of powerhouses within their respective conferences or divisions or what have you. So this isn't to say that Ball State, and by the way, Ohio, how many years was Ohio terrible, right? And then they realized like, oh wait, we're like right there in Ohio and Pennsylvania and West Virginia. Yeah, we're kind of in a recruiting gold mine right there. Let's just capitalize on that. So I guess what does Mike Urinovich CD? What does he need to do to win at Ball State when other coaches have failed?
Well, you have to build like elite staffs, right? And so
You do.
you've
You
seen
have to.
coaches honestly have success there, relative to Ball State, right? So Pete Lembo, fucking fantastic coach, and you know that. Excuse my language. I just get fired up talking about Pete Lembo. We love him on the show. If you're in the MAC, you know exactly how good he is for you. If you're a Ball State fan listening, you remember those days, back in what was it, 2012, 2013, taking you to those bowl games, the Beef O'Brady's Bowl, the GoDaddy's Bowl, iconic bowls of the early 2010s, right? We love that there. But yeah, and then you also have Brady Hoke too, who again, like say what you want about him and what he did at Michigan and the end of the years at San Diego State. But the reality is like he was a pretty damn good coach for Ball State to have, for sure. So you have to hit on Yurmavich, and he has to hit on his staff too. So I would love to get into the staff here, and kind of go through it. So it's going to be a lot. There's about 10, 12 coaches I'll be talking about, 10, 12 staff members I'll be talking about. The interesting thing here is so a lot of the ways that coaching staffs are traditionally broken down in these, um, programs in college football is you get 10 assistant coaches and you usually have 5 on offense, 5 on defense, and then special teams coordinator, and then your strength and conditioning and all that kind of stuff. That's like different than just your actual on the field assistants. So a lot of times it works as you have an OC who also kind of coaches a position, then you have 4 other position groups, and you have a DC defense coordinator who also coaches a position group, and then you have 4 other assistant position coaches. But the interesting thing is, so Yurmavich, like I said, he's going to be calling plays for you. He's going to be the offensive coordinator, which gives you a 5th staff member to kind of play around with on just position coaches for this team. So you've got quarterback coach, right, who's going to be also the pass game coordinator, and Chris Harmon. He's been with Yurmavich for a while now. He was with him at Temple, with him at NIU. He also knows the Midwest area. He's been recently coaching high school football in Illinois and Chicago area at Batavia and Bennett Academy. The offensive line coach is going to be Alex Barr. He played for Yurmavich at NC State. He played for him, which is awesome. He also coached at his alma mater there at NC State. The last few seasons has been at Butler with Yurmavich, and they have been running the ball very, very well there. They averaged over 200 yards a game last season, which is fantastic. The running backs coach, he's a guy, a little bit newer name, Madison Bunches. He was at Southeastern Missouri as the RB coach there. He's been at Rutgers as well. He also coached wide receivers in his past as well. Not a ton of connection there with Yurmavich, but the reality is he wanted him and he got him. Tight end coach is going to be Sean Chase. He coached with Yurmavich at Butler. He also worked with him at NIU as well, so he's familiar with the MAC like Yurmavich is as well. And this is where it gets interesting. You have 2 different wide receiver coaches, excuse me. You've got an inside receivers coach, which is going to be Ray Holmes. He was the receiving coach at Butler. He also coached at NIU and Temple, with Yurmavich. So this is program number 4 that Yurmavich and Holmes are going to be going together with, coaching wide receivers. And then the wide receivers coach, like the outside wide receivers coach, is going to be Shaq Van. He was the wide receiver coach at Ball State this past season. So that kind of works out great. So not only does Yurmavich get his guy in Ray Holmes, who's been in with him for a long time, but the wide receivers coach who is current on the staff, who was on Ball State's, this past season, who coached Malcolm Gilly, Cam Pickett, a couple of very good receivers, productive receivers in the MAC for you. One of the best parts about your team this past season, the bright spots, that wide receiver room, he gets to stay on staff, kind of build that continuity, continue that growth as it was from 2024. Jack Van also coached back in 2023 with Washington as their graduate assistant for the wide receivers. And we all know how good those wide receivers were in that room. Obviously, a lot of other good, very good coaches on that coaching staff. I get that for Washington, but he was there with those. And obviously that kind of translated into his success this past season at Ball State with Malcolm Gilly and Cam Pickett.
I'd say like on the offensive side of the ball, and I guess because Yurimovich, he's more of an offensive guy, you'd say. I like continuity, right? You started with Lance Leipold, right? When he went up in the ranks, he just retained continuity, right? When you have your coaching staff that is all aligned, right, and people that in the building that are, pushing the culture, right, and the play style that your team is akin to, when you have an identity like that, particularly in the MAC, right? You're going to have success. So you can do that. So if I'm going to be optimistic about this, offensive coaching staff, it's going to be that this coaching staff, a lot of these guys are coming from Butler. Now, obviously, you have a couple different pieces here. There, it's inevitable that you're going to have some turnover, right? But I like that he's kept a lot of pieces from his days at Butler, or guys that he's coached with before.
Without a doubt, you said that too. Also helps when you're going out on the recruiting trail. You don't have to waste time. We talked about it in our previous videos,
They
how
all
big
know.
of a whirlwind. They know exactly what they're looking for on the recruiting trail. And also like schematically, culture-wise, you don't have to
And
install to
and the
10,
high
12.
school coaches in Illinois, the high school coaches in Indiana,
Yep.
Western Ohio, like you have those connections there in the staff, which is huge. That is so big. That is so big.
And I love, and you will see this the rest of today as we go through this recording, when we get into Central Michigan staff, when we get into Temple staff, the connection between the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, to me, is so pivotal in getting guys doing the things that you want to be doing and getting things culturally, mentality wise, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, the OC is going to be Ramovich, right? And his connection is to the O line coach, Alex Barr, who played for him at NC State, right? So you have that kind of, bond there, and has also been with him at Butler, having success there too. I love that. I absolutely love that. Getting the defensive side of the ball, right? So this is a little different because Yarmovich is an offensive guy. So when you're looking at these offensive coaches, when you see these OCs or you see these offensive, minded head coaches get hired, a lot of times the defensive side of the ball, those almost are like more pivotal because you almost trust Yarmovich to get his side of the ball right. And he has to make fantastic hires on the defense side of the ball to be able to trust guys and give them freedom to go out and succeed. And when he doesn't really have as much say on the defensive side of the ball. So starting with the defensive coordinator, it's going to be Jeff Knowles, right? So he was on Ball State staff in 2024, but he does have familiarity there with Juranovic. They worked together at a couple stops, right? So Butler, St. Francis, NIU, and also Temple. The reality is that defense for Ball State needs to be better. They were bottom two in the MAC.
In scoring defense, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
bottom
so
two
I
in
get,
the bottom three in the country.
so I get
Gross.
that you had a lot of new faces on the defense side of the ball, but the reality is like it needs to be a lot better. Was it 40 points per game? Just about like 175 yards on the ground, 280 on the air. Like it's ugly. Not to say that it won't get better or not. I think it will help too if you have a consistent offense, right? That is running the ball very, very well and consistently. It can help your defense put yourself in better spots. But complementary effect ball is very important. But the reality is Jeff Knowles knows he needs to be better, and I think Yarovich trusts him to do that. The D-line coach is also going to dub as the defensive run game coordinator, Adam Sawicki. He was the DC for Yarovich at Butler back in 2014. They were damn good, right? They were fourth in the FCS, only allowing 16 points per game in that season in 2024. It's fantastic. The cornerbacks coach, who's also going to be the passing game coordinator, is Ray Smith. He was at Kennesaw and Southeastern Missouri. He was a first team All MAC at DB back at NIU. So there's that little connection there between Yurovich um and Ray Smith from NIU and in the MAC as well when he played there. Safeties coach is going to be Roy Mannering. So he was the defensive coordinator at DePaul and Denison, right? DePaul in Indiana there. He's also a very good recruiter for them. He has, like I said, ties to Indianapolis, to Indiana, to Chicago suburbs, right? So those are big spots for you if you're Ball State, where you're going to be making your money in terms of recruiting spots. Your snipers is going to be kind of this hybrid between your linebackers and your big nickels, your big safeties. So guys that are athletic and play in space, work in the box, kind of like big slots, big nickels, rovers, whatever you want to call them. So Jalen Moss is going to be that guy. He was been at Butler for 3 years. He coached cornerbacks there. He's also worked a ton in the state of Indiana as well, at Butler, at Indiana State, also St. Francis. He played there, and now will be at Ball State there. So I love the continuity on the defense side of the ball. A lot of ties with Yurovich at Butler, also ties to the state of Indiana. Things you love to see.
Yeah, and when you're looking at the roster turnover this year, if you want to talk about trying to improve those sides of the football, I would anticipate the defensive side of the football actually improving more because there was significant roster turnover, at least so far on that side of the ball. Plus, I mean, it can't get much worse, right? I mean, you were what, bottom 15 schedule in the country in terms of strength of schedule, and you gave up the third most points in the entire country, right? That's not good, okay? And you don't get to play yourself, right? Offensively, I didn't think that they were that bad, right? Like relative to like some of the years that they've had there at Ball State, or relative to some of the other back like teams. But Saman's gone, like Cam Pickett's gone, Pemberton's gone, right? You got your offensive tackle's gone, your tight end is gone, your entire offense is gone, right? So Mike Yurinovich, honestly, he's not going to be working with that much. There's a lot of new faces in there, guys that necessarily haven't proven productivity at this level. So it is going to be very interesting to see what kind of offense that Yurimovich can muster up. That's what I'm going to be looking for in 2025 for Ball State. What does their offense look like? Right? Because I'm anticipating their defense somewhat getting a little bit better because it has to, just mathematically, it has to, right?
You
But who
think
knows?
so? And switching to the third phase of the football, special teams coordinator is going to be Nick Fiacabo, Fiacabo, something like that. I'm so sorry for butchering that, but he was a special teams analyst at UConn this past season. He's actually from Indiana as well, so the connection, those deep roots to the state there, I think are fantastic. The connection between Juranovic and Coach Nick is going to be at UConn's Doug Scherer. He was a guy that coached Juranovic a couple years ago back at NC State. So there's that little connection there. And then the special teams coach is going to be TJ Greenstone. He's been at Butler for, I think, he was there for 7 years or something like that. So he was been with Juranovic before, knows exactly what he wants in his players and all that kind of good stuff. So again, that continuity there, like I said, it's a whirlwind of a first offseason to have some of those familiar faces, guys that know what you're looking for, can save you some time and give you a chance to win in season one when all that stuff is going on, especially with the roster turnover and everything else you're dealing with in 2025 of college football. Just gives you chances there. So overall, honestly, I think the staff is super interesting. Now, obviously, like it still remains to be seen how these guys are going to fare at Ball State, how they're going to gel together, if they're going to be able to assemble talent, to be able to win in the MAC and all that kind of good stuff. How long is it going to take for them to really be able to play their kind of football on both sides of the ball? But I think early optimism on paper, I think this is a solid staff, especially with the resources you're dealing with too. Like you can't just go out and pluck guys from Power Four here and there and give yourself chances, in these big name hires, these splashy hires. But I kind of love some grit and some grind, especially guys who have ties to the state of Indiana. I just think that's so important at Ball State, because if you're going to be doing that, if you're going to be living in Muncie, right, you got to love that stuff, and you got to love the state, you got to love the university. And honestly, I think they've got a couple guys there that are going to fit that mold and give them a chance to win some football games.
Continuity and fit. Those are your most important things. And I think we don't know about fit just yet, or even how like Mike Yurimovich is going to fit at this Ball State program. I'm thinking that he's going to be pretty fine here, right? He knows what he's doing. Like you talked about earlier, he's been in the MAC. Okay, he knows how to coach in the MAC, right? He's coached offense. He's coached MAC championship offenses in the MAC. He knows how to win games. When I'm looking at the expectations here, and I don't know whether you'll agree with me or not. You may disagree with me, and that's totally fine. But my expectations at Ball State, okay, are say you have a 9-year stint, like the Mike New, like that's my expectation. All right,
Mm-hmm.
you make it 8 or 9 years as a coach there, and you make it to like 2 bowl games. Hell, if you win one, which has only been done once in their program history, I mean, the expectation to me is make it to a bowl game, maybe every 3 years, 4 years, right? It's not going to be that frequent. All right. There's going to be like little spikes. Okay. And then you're going to see, your team gets poached in transfer portal every 3, 4 years, right? You should have a pretty decent roster. It's stacking losing seasons that, kind of becomes an issue there. But that's kind of the reality of what it is as a program. And if he ends up doing really well at Ball State, gets hired somewhere else, I think he will have exceeded my expectations. So for that reason, I think that he's going to have a pretty okay career there at Ball State. He'll take him to some bowl games every now and then, every 3, 4 years or whatever. You may have a pocket in there of success. I think it's going to be tough to win here. I'll give it a B because, honestly, in terms of fit, I like it a lot. I like his staff. Like you talked about, continuity and fit. The reality is, like, that's my expectation for Ball State. It's not very high, right? That's why I think he can meet those expectations.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think if this were to become a successful tenure, like if you last 9 years at any place, that's got to be considered a success. Now, obviously, I think Mike New and someone like would have loved it to end a little bit better than it did, but they also won 7 games once, right? 7-1, right? When they played that mostly max schedule, and then I think it was all max schedule. I'm pretty sure, and then Mike, you finished it up with another 6-win season the year after, so like you said, those little spurts, if you can collect some group of talent, every couple of years and put yourself in a chance, to go to a bowl game, that's fantastic. That'll keep you there. Excuse me. That'll buy you plenty of time because the floor will bottom out, right? At times. It's going to in college football in 2025. Do you have a good enough staff to raise that floor? We've seen the floor bottom out plenty of times the past couple of decades at Ball State. You're looking at 10-digit, or excuse me, double-digit losses. It's never what you want to see if you're Ball State. Put yourself in a spot so you aren't finishing last in your conference in your down years, right? Give yourself a chance. And yeah, honestly, I'll give it a B minus here. Like I said, I do worry this is a really tough place to win. I know Butler was a good program. I trust Juranovic, I think, and it sounds like he put together good staff. I just think this is a really hard place to win, especially with the future of the MAC. You've got a couple programs that are really, really rolling right now, and trying to crack into that top there could be pretty tough. You have a couple auto losses on your schedule every year, plus with the way the portal is going, and those next couple years, I think could be pretty shaky in terms of roster retention. Once we do get into, I think, a little bit safer spot, maybe you can see this thing start to even out and steady out if you don't have guys that are getting poked every year, your best players. But for now, I'll go B minus. I feel pretty safe about that. That's a little conservative, but you know what? I think I feel pretty good about that.
Stay in the MAC. Let's go to Central Michigan. Okay. Jim McElwain out. So who's in? Guy by the name of Matt Drinkall. Okay, where's he been at? Army. He's been at Kansas Wesleyan, and then St. Ambrose. A bunch of places you've never really heard of. Okay, but I'll tell you what, I like him a lot. I like him a lot. I can't help it. Sorry, I can't help it. His success that he had. Okay, so I guess his history. He was with Army from COVID to this past season. He was the offensive line coach for Army this past year in 2024. And yeah, if you don't know, it was a pretty good unit over there for Army.
The,
At
the Joe
Kansas,
Moore winners.
Yeah, it was a pretty good unit. Okay, so he was going to get promoted at some point. All right, this is a really big bump for him. I think this is awesome. He's sort of from the Midwest. He's from Bettendorf, Iowa, which is the border of like Illinois and Iowa. So basically Davenport. All right, it's basically where that is. Kansas Wesleyan was not very great. All right. I think they went 2-9 in his first year. All right. But when he left that program, I mean, they're a powerhouse now in the NAIA over there. Kansas Wesleyan is a powerhouse. All right. They're a good team. They're making the playoffs almost every year. They're finishing in the top of their conference. And that is literally because of him. He built that program up. He built that culture up. Okay. He's had success there. Now, it does get a little interesting because that's his only head coaching experience, right? In FCS to FBS. We talk about it here. You can do it. There have been a lot of success stories. But I also like the fact that he went from FCS to a coordinator spot, in college football, position coach, right? Kind of like the Matt Entz route. And then now here he is, earning his way to head coaching spot here at Central Michigan, a place that I think you could do damage at Central Michigan. A lot of coaches have done damage at Central Michigan. So I think that there may be a pretty high expectation, though, for Matt Drinkall.
Yeah, they're pretty familiar with that bowl game, with playing December football, which is the expectation. If you're the Chippewas there up at Central, you've had Brian Kelly come through, you've had Butch Jones come through, Dan Enos, a couple of guys that have coached big time football, down in the SEC there, as well as Jim McElwain, who came from the SEC as well, right? So you kind of have those ties there, in that success, that pedigree of a coach. So this was a, I would say, a pretty good job on the market, especially in this season, this offseason, when you only had what, four Power Four coaching opportunities. Central Michigan puts themselves right towards the top, especially of those MAC openings. You look at the MAC coaching salaries, Jim McElwain is right up there with everybody else, with not with anybody else, with just the top payers. Him, Chuck Martin, Jason Candle, and Jim McElwain were the only, MAC coaches that were making over seven figures. So this is an important job, right, in the MAC, the hierarchy of things, all that kind of good stuff. And I think it scared people originally when he showed up and it's like, oh, he's coming from Army. And they're like, uh-oh, are we about to run the triple option? Are we about to run flex bone? All that kind of, first of all, fun football. But the reality is that's not what he came from. You talked about him and what he did at Kansas Wesleyan in the NAIA there. It was a no huddle power spread kind of offense. And he had a ton of different route combinations, different running schemes, gap, power, trap, reads, right? He had a somewhat athletic quarterbacks, but more so just guys that had enough, juice in them to just pull the ball, give guys a threat. So what they want to do is get their running backs and their athletes in space. They also run a really nice sprint out package as well. And the way he does that, he's had success everywhere he's been, which is no surprise. Back to his stuff at Kansas Wesleyan, right? Back in 2018, they were freaking bulldozers on offense, right? They averaged 54 points per game. They averaged 530 yards per game. They had certain games where they had 83 points in one game. That is crazy. 49 in one quarter. You're looking at some Big Ten numbers there. Obviously, I do not expect that trend to continue in the MAC. That would be crazy. Now, wouldn't that be fantastic, our Chippewa friends? But the reality is, he's going to take a step back from that. But him at Army was also fantastic. He learned under fantastic, and I mean fantastic coaching staff there. Not only did he have the scheme, so he was brought in there, and he even talked about it. He was brought in there as a guy that was like scheme. And that's what he did so well at Kansas Wesleyan, putting guys in spots where you had, just wide open dudes, and they just taking advantage of these lower level competitions. And he came to Army, and it was kind of a nice, whip in the butt there because of what it did to him as a coach, rounding him out. So you have that scheme side of you, but then you also can pair that with the culture and building relationships and running a program, especially in 2025, and the difficulties it is to run a program at Army, right? And similar but different challenges that you face at Central Michigan. I'm super impressed with this hire. I'm super impressed with him. I just think it's going to be super fun. Like they'll be running 11, 21, 21, 11, 12, 21, multiple personnel groups, a lot of things you can do with each one. He's the Midwest guy. You mentioned it. He has recruiting ties to the state of Michigan, as for part of the time when he was on Army staff, he was the Michigan area recruiter for that staff. And obviously, we love, selfishly, as wearing my Bears hoodie right now, he's a big Chicago sports fan. So obviously, nice little tip in the cap to him there. We've also seen these smaller coaches like come from these like lower levels of football and have success, right? And have success in the FBS. And I just think it's awesome that he's getting a shot here. I think he was a guy that probably had options, especially with how they performed this past season at Army and what he was doing there. I'm sure he was content to stay there as well. He only took this job. He talked about how special of an opportunity was, how blown away he was of the athletic director of this program in this facility to be able to be put in a spot to actually win championships at Central Michigan, which, make no mistake, is part of the expectation, I think, to put yourselves in spots to win the MAC. It's not too long ago that McElwain did that for you. So I don't know. I cannot be more excited to see what this is going to be. Obviously, McElwain, what he did for this program was fantastic, and kind of building it back up from what it was after going 1-11 and then winning, bam, 8 games, in your first season there, and then obviously winning the MAC championship. But I think some fresh blood and, fresh air, I think will be a good thing if you're Central Michigan and what Matt Drinkall can bring to the table.
Yeah, and Amy Foley, the athletic director, she's not an idiot. All right, she worked at Texas. She worked at Georgia. Okay. She's been in those facilities. She understands the kind of resources they need to put into these programs. And they're not able to put in those kinds of resources in this program. Right. But she's going to find a way to get this football program what it needs. Okay. This is her first hire, right? She was AD in 2020, but McElwain was hired in 2019, right? So she made the decision to fire Jim McElwain, I guess, or they parted ways or whatever. But he's still in the program, right? So if you're worried about, Drinkall, like, basically being able to like by osmosis, like kind of fuse into this program, like get connected, kind of make that transition easier. McElwain is still on staff, in that athletic department as the special assistant to the AD, kind of like Dwight, the assistant to the manager, right? So he's going to be still involved in this program. So like he's going to have a resource right there for him, if he's got questions about, whatever, obviously like traditions and things are a big deal to a lot of these schools. So getting plugged in with those right away is smart, right? It's smart. So yeah, I'm with you, dude. I think this could be awesome. I think this could be really awesome. Talk about like smaller programs too, and like just winning and making bowl games is different than like college football playoff aspirations. If you have college football playoff aspirations as a G5 program, your coach needs to offer something exceptional to the table. And like you talked about, this could potentially be his offense, right? We haven't seen it at the Division One level, right? We really haven't, right? But at Kansas Wesleyan, like they were absolutely humming, right? And is this something that you see very often in the MAC? I'm gonna go ahead and say no. Right, I'm gonna go ahead and say no. So I think this was a really, really good hire, and the expectations for him are probably pretty high because, like you said, yeah, the Brian Kellys, the Danny Enoses, the Jim McElwains, right? They've had really good hires in the past, that have won a lot of games, won championships, right? Won bowl games. The expectation, I think, for Matt Drinkall here is probably make a bowl game almost every year. Is that the expectation? I mean, say he's a coach there for 6 years. It's probably make a bowl game in 5 of them, right?
Yeah,
Because
four out of six probably. Yeah, 4 to 5. I would say that. That's definitely fair.
so I think expectations are high relative to some of the other MAC teams that we've talked about so far. And I think that they're in a much better position to win than the Ball States, than the Akrons, right? Than the Kent States. Okay, so they can find some more wins against some of those upper tier talented teams. And by the way, how many of those teams lose a significant amount of talent right next year? You have Bowling Green. Think about all the talent that they lose, particularly in that senior class. Right? Think about Ohio. Now they haven't had problems replacing stuff in the past, and we'll be
New
talking about
coach
their
there.
their coaching hire and how he's freaking awesome, right? And how continuity with him will help that a lot. But yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, some of those programs like Miami, Ohio, Toledo, they'll always be buzzing, right? I guess Northern Illinois is in there for 1 year, but I think Central Michigan can make some noise, man. I think Matt Drinkle can do it. I'm excited. Have you talked about his coaching staff?
No, I can get into that here. Yeah, so he's bringing in a lot of new faces. I don't think there's any carryover from the previous staff, for better or for worse, right? So getting in the offense side of the ball, it's going to be Eastern Washington's offensive coordinator Jim Chapin is coming over to help drink call plays. Now I'm not too sure exactly who will be calling plays, what system they'll be running. I assume it's going to be a blend of what they both did. Drinkall sounded very happy to go out and get him. He's bringing over his offensive line coach Hayden Mace, also from Eastern Washington. I talked about in our Ball State video just recently that continuity there is so important, right? Having those two position coaches on the same field or on the same page, right, when they are on the field there is so important, giving you a chance to get yourself in right spots, right plays, personnel, all that kind of stuff that you want to have success, in. And also Drinkall knows exactly how important it is to have elite offensive lines coming over as an offensive line guy himself from Army. And he saw what that did for them, with the Black Knights this past season. The running backs coach is going to be Sheldon Croney. And he was a guy that went to Iowa State as a running back. He's also been their assistant running backs coach for a couple of years now. Listen, I know it wasn't all him because it's running backs coach right now ultimately has that say in the head coach as well in terms of rotating guys. But they did an interesting thing in terms of riding the hot hand this past season, they had, 3 running backs that they trusted. Now, I personally loved one of them a little bit more than the other guys in Abu Sama, who I thought needed more carries. But the reality is they were not afraid to sub guys in and out depending on what their matchups thought. To me, that feels very Drinkall-esque in terms of like, let's ride the hot hand, let's find matchups, do things we want to make sure we put ourselves in spots and not get caught complacent doing the same things over and over again. So I can see why he likes him, with Crony as the wide running backs coach. You're bringing in wide receiver coach from Sacramento State is going to be Keyshawn Coleman. The tight ends coach is going to be, Derek Felton from Grandview. He'll also be the co-coordinator, have that tag, but, it's more about pay grade, not really just about actually who's calling plays and all that kind of stuff. Now, some things I love about this offensive staff is notice the small schools, right? Eastern Washington, Sacramento State, Grandview, Eastern Washington, like those, and that just feels so Drinkall to me, right? Having his connections throughout those smaller schools, seeing and having respect for those schools in that level of play, and seeing all these coaches come up to the FBS level and have success immediately that he plans to imitate. So yeah, I think it's super intriguing. Obviously, you don't have a ton to say about the staff just yet. We'll see how it goes. And obviously, the offense will have a lot of drink hall, um, influence on it because of what he did at Kansas Wesleyan, because of what he did at Army as well. And I'm sure he's excited to get back and do some control on the offense side of the ball as well, coming from Army. But yeah, that's what I got for the offense side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, when we were talking about, it's too early to judge, right? I mean, we were hyping up Urimovich's staff, which, I'm a big fan at these smaller schools of continuity and fit, right? There's some continuity on this staff, more so on the defensive side of the football. And I don't know how a lot of these guys are going to fit. I really don't. So it's kind of a waiting game there. But the idea, I guess, is that we just got to trust Drinkall, right?
It's different too because Drinkall or Juranovic was a head coach and he was able to bring his staff like over from Butler, and it's not hard to convince, coaches and their families to move from Indianapolis to Muncie. It's about 55 miles away, right? So it's a lot different going from Army to Central Michigan, or like having guys from Kansas Wesleyan from his former past meet him there. So obviously a lot different situation there. The interesting thing is after watching a lot of his videos on him breaking down film, breaking down certain structures and how he formats his offense, one thing that's super interesting that I thought, and I don't know if this is still the case, this was about 8 years ago, back when he was at Wesleyan, is when they call it teaching things fundamentally. And I'm going to get super nerdy here. Not super nerdy. I'll get a little nerdy here for our football viewers, right? So in terms of like this example, they did not teach their quarterbacks or wide receivers what cover 2 was, what cover 3 was, what cover 4 was, different 2 high safeties, 1 high safeties, blocked middle, stuff like that. So they just kind of taught things based on, certain looks and basically feels. It wasn't really like, it was super interesting. And he kind of explaining how like sometimes you get people confused because you see a 1 high safety and you think the middle of the field is not open, but it actually can be attacked. And so I don't know if that's going to be the case there because obviously you're coming from lower level football in Kansas Wesleyan. There's only so much you can do there. Now you do get in the MAC. You're also trying to develop players for the professional games as well. So we'll see how that, if any, changed from his time at Army now to his time at Central Michigan. But I wanted to get that factoid in there because I thought it was super, super interesting. And I was like, here's a college head coach who is putting up 50 freaking points per game. And they're like, yeah, our quarterbacks don't know, never heard of quarter, half. And it's like, what? That's just crazy. And similar things with the offensive line and their teach tapes, what they did, blocking fronts and everything was based on, it was kind of similar, whether it was even or odd man fronts and all that kind of stuff. So it's wild and it worked at an extremely high level. He loved making it super simple for them. I don't know if it'll be the same. Obviously, I'm not going to be, in those position meeting groups right at Central Michigan, but I would love to see, maybe the more and more we get after it and the more they talk about stuff in spring practice and fall camp and all that stuff and kind of hear things coming out of the offense side of the ball, see what's really going on behind the scenes there. But yeah, sorry, like a little tangent there, but going to the defense side of the ball and that coaching staff, like you said, there's going to be a little bit more continuity from his time at Army. So the defensive coordinator is going to be Sean Cronin. He's a guy that's the defensive line coach at Army. He also is a guy that has ties to Michigan. I believe he's a Detroit native, right? So obviously not too far from Central Michigan there. And then he also, so I talked about earlier how Drinkall was the Michigan area recruiter for Army until Cronin came in, and he ended up being the Michigan area recruiter because he's obviously from that area, and we saw Drinkall kind of slide a little bit west, go over to Chicago and the Dakotas and Washington. So obviously to have that staff there, have a lot of ties to that Midwest, even though you're coming from Army, is fantastic. The D-line coach is a former MAC guy, or former MAC D-line coach at Ball State, Anthony Shakir. So he's familiar there with the MAC. The cornerbacks coach is Christian Dukes. He's coming up from the FCS. Obviously, more of that small school mentality stuff. He's a little bit more respected. Obviously, a younger coach, but a guy that people really have an eye on. I'm sure wouldn't be surprised to see him start shooting up in the coaching world. And then the safeties coach is going to be Wes Fleming. He worked at Army with Drinkall. He also worked with him at Kansas Wesleyan. So there's finally that connection between Kansas Wesleyan, and Drinkall. So that's super fun. Special teams coordinator is going to be Keith Murphy. He'll stay there. Obviously, was Central Michigan's special teams coordinator this past season. And then strength and conditioning coach is going to be Jake Riddell. He's been at Cincinnati, LSU, a couple other guys. He's also at Army as well, and was number 2 in command there, during this past season. And we know how good they were in the trenches. So obviously that's good news for Drinkall. A little bit of continuity there in terms of that strength and conditioning coach.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess the Michigan ties for some of these coaches are big, right? But I think, more importantly, like you said, something I didn't know that you brought up was that Drinkall has recruited the state of Michigan a lot. So familiarity there. And then maybe that's, Jim Chapin, the guy, the offense coordinator, Michigan native from Troy, parents are CMU graduates, some interesting stuff in terms of recruiting. Maybe I'm liking this fit a little bit better than I did before we had this conversation.
Yeah, well, and Drinkall too is just super impressive. I think our Central Michigan fans will just start to fall in love with him. The more and more they hear him talk. You saw him do some media when he first got hired. Obviously, he's hit the ground running. I think they just had a couple more signees come, over this past National Signing Day. I guess we're recording this on the 6th of February, Thursday. So just yesterday was the official National Signing Day, which is really the second National Signing Day in college football. But yeah, like I said, I'm super impressed with what he's done so far in his career. Obviously, it's been 2 months, right? He's been at Central Michigan, so we can't make these crazy conclusions just yet. But if I had to give my grade, I'll go B plus here. Like I said, B plus in our show, we talk about meeting expectations, right? B plus means he's going to exceed that just a little bit more. And obviously, but maybe is the expectation there in terms of going to bowl games pretty consistently. I can see him absolutely competing at the top quarter of the MAC for some of those spots. We've seen how competitive it was this past season in November, and that race to the finish line that Ohio ultimately ended up winning. And I wouldn't be crazy to see, not to get our hopes up for our Central Michigan fans, but listen, I think Drinkall's legit. I think you do too. I think you guys are excited for him. Sounds like he's got some buy-in. Sounds like he has the resources and support from the athletic director Foley to get things done there, and obviously, it's going to take a lot to get it done, but he sounds like he knows what he's doing, right? And obviously, we're just making predictions here. This is February, of 2025. We still have, 6 months until we're even sniffing pre-games of football, and obviously, a lot has to be decided with different roster turnover. We haven't gotten into that, and we won't get in that yet, for Central Michigan in terms of what they'll do in the portal, what they lost, what they're getting, and a lot has to be desired. But yeah,
I'm looking at expectations and asking myself the question: is Drinkall going to meet these expectations? When we give out grades, right? B's, he's meeting expectations. A's, he's exceeding. C's, he's not. I don't think we've ever given out a D. All right. I think he's going to meet, if not slightly exceed expectations. Okay, the expectations are high for coaches at Central Michigan, and you know what? Maybe deservingly so because you've hired coaches and they have worked out or won championships. I mean, you won with McElwain. Danny Enos was really good. Decent, I guess I should say. Butch Jones won championships. Brian Kelly was pretty solid there as well. The expectation is high. When Central Michigan hires a coach, they expect wins. So I still think he's going to meet expectations. I think he's a good coach, man. And I think the world's just waiting to see what he's really capable of. Just small town kid from Iowa. So did you end up giving a B plus as well?
Yeah, I'm B plus with you there.
Good stuff. All right. Let's head over then to the American Conference. Talk about Temple. Let's go to Philadelphia. All right. Out is Stan Drayden. In is, I think, the most exciting hire that we're talking about today. Casey Keeler. Guy who just wins. He's faced adversity, sure. So who's Casey Keeler, right? Well, he's coming over from Sam Houston State, okay? If you didn't know, Sam Houston State had a pretty good season this year in the CUSA, all right? Just 2 seasons ago was their first year in FBS football, and they lost, I think, their first 8 games. Pretty disastrous, right? Pretty disastrous. But he immediately bounces back and wins almost double-digit games. Maybe he won double-digit games because I think they won their bowl game, right? I'm trying to think.
They did, but he wasn't coaching.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Well, the point is, they had a good season. He won a ton of football games at Sam Houston State, including national championships, right? Way back in the day, okay, he used to coach at Delaware, okay, so that Northeastern ties are strong at Rowan University, which, if you don't know, is in New Jersey. So the New Jersey ties are strong, and he's a guy who's from Pennsylvania. So to say that he doesn't have Northeastern ties coming from Sam Houston State as a coach are just wrong. Okay, he's got the geographical ties. He's also got the connections from the Texas high schools. Believe me, there are plenty of Texas high school players that don't get recruited to the big boys, all right, and that slip through the cracks, and they end up being pretty good. Okay, and Sam Houston State's success early is, proof of that. I think he's just a really good coach. I think he's incredibly experienced. I think he knows what he's doing. And Temple is another one of those places we just talked about, Central Michigan being a place where they've hit on a lot of coaches before. Temple is too. Temple's also a place where they have hit on some coaches or have had some big names. Al Golden, Matt Rule, Jeff Collins, right? It's just really been these last 8 or 6 years that maybe hasn't been great. Okay. And that's what makes it challenging for us when deciding, what is the expectation of the program realistically. I think the performance and what you've seen in the past, from when they're independents and in the MAC to now in the later years of the American with Rod Carey and Stan Drayden, finding out, kind of calculating those expectations for this program are a little bit more challenging than they maybe were 8, 9 years ago, right? So, but I'm liking this hire a lot, by the way.
Yeah, we talked about, these past 2 coaches coming up from the FCS, coming from Army as a position coach, going from NAIA as Kansas Wesleyan, and these past 2 coaches in the MAC. This is a little bit more well-known, right? This is a little bit more experienced guy. This guy's a little bit older, right? He's 65, which, by the way, he looks great for 65. To me, it gives, on a probably lesser scale, but a little bit of, your Willie Fritz, your Kirk Signetti kind of vibes in terms of hiring these older, proven guys who have succeeded at these lower levels and in the G5 there. This is a fantastic hire. You talked about what it means for him going back to the home state of Pennsylvania and also the success you can have there. You talked about those coaches. I'll throw in Manny Diaz for a couple of weeks now. I'm kidding. But Temple has had success, right? Most recently in 2016, right, with Matt Rule, you won an American title. You beat Navy, right? You've had success in the Big or in the MAC. You've had success as an independent. You've done these things. You've produced solid coaches. It's just been the past couple 10 years that haven't worked out for you. And maybe it was COVID that kind of set you back and you kind of couldn't recover from that. Maybe it's just the trending direction of college football and the madness it has been of conference realignment, of NIL, of transfer portal, and just kind of that whirlwind there that hit after 2020, which led to, maybe a couple down years at Temple. But like you said, the expectation is that this is a spot where you can win, and you can win big, honestly, at the American. I have no doubt in my mind that Temple is a school that can make the college football playoffs, right? I'm not saying the expectation is to,
Right.
but there is absolutely a scenario where Temple is playing in the playoffs, and it's not that far-fetched. Keeler, is a guy that won a couple titles, one at Delaware, one at Sam Houston. He knows what to do. He knows how to win, how to build a program. He obviously is 65. He's not taking this job as a stepping stone job either. He's going back home, setting himself up for life after football, but he's obviously super focused and locked on to winning at Temple. So this is also why I love this hire too. We talked about, in a similar sense, with Rice and Scott Abel in terms of a guy that's probably not a guy that's going to be using Rice as a stepping stone to other jobs. This seems similar here with Casey Keeler's guy that's going to ride it out with Temple until he ultimately ends up, either being hopefully not fired, but throughout or kind of chooses to stop coaching football. And obviously he was a guy, he talked about too, how hard it was to leave Sam Houston. He had a lifetime contract there. He was a guy that built that program. He's a guy that brought it from the FCS to the FBS, had success this past season, but obviously wanted a new challenge, obviously wanted to come back home to Pennsylvania. So this is really, really nice. You're going to get a nice pool for salaries. You're going to get, obviously an experienced head coach in this market. Honestly, if you're Temple, looking around here, it's one of the better jobs. One of the better jobs without a doubt, in college football in this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, look, Casey Keeler, he's 65 years old, right? So if you squeeze 6, 7 years out of Casey Keeler, I think that's pretty good. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And obviously, you talked about college football playoffs. That's obviously second standard deviation outcomes, right? Like we're talking about those would be pretty exceptional seasons that are rather unlikely. But in this new American conference, right? There's no reason that Temple can't compete with the North Texases, the FIUs, right? The Armies, the Navies. Like they should be able to compete. Their geography, you're telling me you can't win at Temple? Ask Matt Rule, right? What you can do. You can go in the state of New Jersey. You can go west into Ohio, right? You can go in New York. You can go right there. Philadelphia is a wagon of talent right there. Um, I like Casey Keeler. I think that, when you look at Stan Drayden, okay, and you want to talk about fit, like, was he really a good fit at Temple? Okay. Uh, he obviously had the Texas ties, okay. Um, when Arthur Johnson, right, came in as the AD in, what was that, 2021?
Yep.
Okay. The next year, right, he had worked with, Stan Drayden at Texas Tech. He was assistant coach, running backs coach, whatever. Okay. Arthur Johnson goes to be he was a football operations senior associate AD at Texas. He goes to Temple to be the AD. And then next year he brings, Arthur Johnson to be the head coach of that football program. But Arthur Johnson's a guy that he coached at, Ohio State, Texas, the Chicago Bears, right? And while that resume is awesome, okay, did he fit, right? Is really the question that you have to ask sometimes. And I think when we look back on these grades that we give some of these coaches a couple of years from now, there's going to be guys that we missed because we're like, hey, look, this guy has a fantastic resume, but maybe he didn't fit. Okay. I think Casey Keeler, as impressive as a resume as he has, right? In terms of like the elite programs, he hasn't coached the elite programs like Arthur Johnson has. But this fit, I think, could be something really special. I think we could see a resurgence of Temple football within these next 6 to 7 years. It might not happen in year one. Hell, when Casey Keeler moved up to FBS with Sam Houston, they stunk in year one. Okay. Year two, they had an identity. They played great defense, right? They ran the football effectively. They had a quarterback that took care of the football. You bring those tendencies and those traits to Temple, man, I think you can win a lot of games in the American, if you're asking me.
Yeah, without a doubt. And also, too, you look at, unavailable data for us to go off of, right, in terms of, coaching salaries from the American Conference. Drayton was top 5, right? Or
Yeah.
he was 6th, right? Obviously, you probably slot him in one below. You probably slot in John Summerall at Tulane, maybe ahead of him. So again, top half though of the American, and that was Dan Drayton, right? And I'm sure Casey Keeler got a nice bump from the 600K he was making at Sam Houston. So I'm sure that was a nice incentive as well to come back home as well. But yeah, you talked about it in what they did at Sam Houston, right? He talks about his offensive philosophies. They had a nice transition too because they used to be an air raid, right? And so they were leading the scoring. They were leading in the country in scoring for a couple of years, but they weren't winning as much. And then, they kind of made some changes there and they went up and just kind of got more physical, playing with tempo still, but, being, more physical in the run game as well. So you kind of have that balance there where he can do. Love to see coaches being flexible, right? And not stubborn, right? Obviously having an identity, but being, willing to hear and change if you have to, season to season if things aren't right or personnel isn't right for you. And that was nice to see there. And then defensively, they'll be running that 3-4. So it'll be a little change up for Temple, who I believe was running a 4-2-5. If I'm not mistaken, Temple fans, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But yeah, you'll have that 3 down the odd front for you. Little bit of change in who you're recruiting for that defensive end spot. A little bit of change in who you're recruiting for your interior defensive line spots in terms of true nose tackles and whatnot. So trying to see what you can do in the portal, finding some big bodies like that. But
It's hard.
yeah,
It's hard finding that.
well, and that's what you said too. Is like Casey Keeler, like it's not going to be automatic. This was a bad football team this past season, right? 3-9 in a not a very good conference,
Well, the
right?
past 6 seasons.
Yeah, yeah. Golly, so it's been rough. It's been really rough. So it's not going to be an overnight change, and I hope, and that sounds like he has buy-in behind him, the support behind him. This is a rebuild, right? Do not expect crazy results in year one. Matt Rule, one of the best coaches in college football, went 2-10 in year one, right? He actually lost more games than Steve Adazio did the prior year, right? So, and he was arguably playing in a worse well, maybe early American was not a terrible conference, but regardless, though, I don't know. I just think with the way the American's shaping out right now, right, with the resources you have, and I know Temple fans are modest, right, in what they have NIL wise. I get that, but everything else you have to offer, right? Kate Keeler put it pretty bluntly. He's like, you're not going to get rich playing football at Temple because of what we're giving you for NIL, but there's a lot of things to offer from this program. There's also a lot of things alumni can offer too. I think that's something that hopefully he can reinvitalize and reinvigorate his alumni base in being donors into his program. It's a very good school up there in Pennsylvania. A lot of successful alumni that could be donating. And I think when all this stuff kind of hit in NIL, you were coming off 1-6, 3-9, 3-9, 3-9, like you're seeing all these seasons. You're like, why am I putting money in to a program? If he can start writing the ship there, you can see that kind of uptick as well to start building your program and moving yourself up the ladder of the American Conference in terms of your NIL budget. And also, too, by then, maybe you'll get some change in terms of actual legislation and actual things that will be a little bit more controlled in terms of that market there. But yeah, I think it's all things to think about. And obviously, we'll get more into it. We'll give our grade later on, but more things to be like, yeah, this is a good hire here. It's maybe not gonna win a conference in year one, but this is a good hire.
Yeah, and he may never win the conference, right, in the 6 or 7 years that I anticipate being. I mean, getting 65, right? But if he can compete consistently, okay, if he can make bowl games consistently, okay, and this is, I guess, before I let you talk about the coaching staff here, my expectations for this program is that you're able to get back, considering the competition that you're playing in your conference, at Temple, you should be able to make a bowl game at least, at minimum, every other year. At minimum. Okay, so if he's there 6 years, he should have 3 bowl game appearances. That's my take. That's what it should be. Okay. And I know it's not perfect right now, and it's going to be, an uphill climb to reach that from where you are right now. But I think Casey Keeler is the guy for the job. I think he is a fantastic coach. He has won. He has ties geographically. He's a good recruiter. He's a great coach. And uh, I guess I'll let you get into his staff then. We'll transition over there. I'll see that you're muted over there. Mute
Tough.
button.
Damn. I lasted this long. Yeah, honestly, you're looking at, the bottom of the American to build off your point there. You should not be there. You should not be there if you are Temple. And I'm sure Casey Keeler knows that. That's why he's been brought in, to get them back to be competing up in that middle 50%. And then obviously have some spark years where you build up to cracking that top quarter of the American. But yeah, so getting in the coaching staff, he's bringing in a young hot shot at OC, right? When I say young, I mean really young. This will be his second year calling plays. So Tyler Walker is his name. He's coming from Montana State. If you know anything about FCS football, they had a hell of a season. And if you watched week 0, you watched them play New Mexico, right? You saw them offensively move the ball, just torch.
Who didn't? Right.
Yeah, well,
I guess Wyoming.
come
Wyoming's
on.
the only team in college football that did not torch New Mexico. But
Yeah, which no surprise there. But yeah, so he's a guy, obviously, like I said, super young. Obviously, his past season was his first time calling plays. And boy, did he crush it. He absolutely crushed it. And obviously he had a ton of talent on that team for sure. We'll see how it works at Temple, and especially with the talent they can bring in year one under Casey Keeler and Tyler Walker. But it'll be interesting. He's also been in this, Midwest-ish area, Big Ten country, if you want to call it. Miami, Ohio was there. He was at Michigan, in Michigan, excuse me, coaching in a couple of different schools in high school as well before going out to Montana State. The offensive line coach again, right? It's going to sound like a broken record here, but I love this factoid here. Also coming from Montana State, having that continuity between your OC and O-line coach. Again, I'm going to say it again, is super, super important in my opinion there. The running back coach is going to be Andrew Pierce. He's a guy that played for Keeler at Delaware. He walked on as a freshman on that team, and as a freshman ran for 1,600 yards and 14 TDs, coming in as a walk-on. It's freaking awesome, right? Wide receiver, which is great. Wide receivers coach is going to be Roy Roundtree, and the tight ends coach is going to be Chris Zarkowski. And that defense side of the ball, you'll be bringing up Brian Smith coming up from Rice. He was there for 7 years. I know their coaches got fired. They didn't have, the most successful seasons there ever. But he was not the reason why. I thought he's a pretty good coach. He's very well respected. Scott Abel, who's coming up from Davidson to go down to Rice, in Houston, wanted to keep him badly, and he was going to. And then Casey Keeler gets hired at Temple and comes calling down to Brian Smith. Obviously, I'm sure there's connections there between his time at Sam Houston and, when Brian Smith was at Rice, because they were there for the same time. So he's going to be employing a 3-4 defense. Like I said, you're going to see a little bit different, your rush linebacker, you call it, right? That fourth linebacker off the edge, is going to be about 6'2", 245, stuff like that. So you put a hand in third as well on that, especially on pass plays and maybe on early rundowns, be on the line of scrimmage there in a 2-point stance. But yeah, so that'll be the difference there. D-line coach, right? Again, more continuity. He was the D-line coach at Rice with Smith. That's Cedric Calhoun. Inside linebackers coach Keith Dazinski. He's the guy that coached with Brian Smith at UMass and at Brown. The outside linebackers coach will be Chris Ratino. He was a guy that's a New Jersey native, right? So in that Northeast ties. And he was also with Keeler, at Delaware. And the cornerbacks coach will be Henry Baker. Special teams coordinator is going to be Brian Ginn. He's a guy that was with Keeler at Delaware. He was also with the Chicago Bears more recently as a special teams assistant there. Very good guy coming from Chicago. And then the GM will be Clayton Barnes. He was with Keeler for a while. He was the GM, I think, this past season. Was also director of football ops and player personnel for Keeler at Sam Houston State. He is an Aggie. He graduated there in 2015. Wow, young kid to be in a spot as a GM for a college football team. But also the reality is, like, not a bad thing to be young. I don't think at all in that situation, in that spot, especially if you have ties and continuity with Coach Keeler.
You know what I love too? It's like He's 65 years old. All right. There are a lot of coaches in his position that are like, oh, these young people, they don't know anything.
Yeah.
What do
Yep.
they know? Right. No, Casey Keeler is like, let me bring in as many big brained people as I possibly can. Right. And you're going to need to, and I know we talked about the competition in the American, like, at least you should be able to be in the top half of the American. I will give you that, some of the top half of the Americans really good. Like
Yeah.
Ryan Silverfield, great coach. We believe in Blake Harrell at East Carolina. South Florida's got a pretty good coach of their own. Army, Navy, Tulane, another really good coach over there. Jeff Traylor's had a lot of success at UTSA. We've got a lot of good coaches. Not to mention North Texas, Eric Morris. We've talked about him. Great coach.
We'll
And guess
get
who
in.
he hired?
Yeah.
Skylar Cassidy,
We'll get
the
into
defensive
Charlotte
coordinator
too
for yeah,
with
and
Tim
we'll get into
Albin.
Charlotte. Tim Albin, who just is coming off 3 back-to-back seasons, first time in that program's history, winning 10 games. So I think you have a conference, not necessarily with like a ton of resources, these schools or talent per se, but some of these coaches in this conference are really good. Some of them are not very good. All right. But I think that this conference got better coaching wise, hiring KC Keeler. He's just another bright mind. Yeah, I have no doubt that if you were to put KC Keeler and give him the resources that they have at like Tulane or Memphis, that he would do awesome, right? But here you are at Temple. I think you got a chance to do something awesome. Okay. So for expectations, I said it already. Okay. I don't know if you had any more notes on the staff there, but expectation wise, okay, for the grades, again, B is meeting expectations and A is exceeding, a C is not. We've never given out a D on this show. That would have to be something pretty special. I don't think we're going to do it again this year. I'm giving it an A minus. All right. When I'm talking about like his ability to win, okay, the fit, okay, the coaching staff, okay, the resources of the program, right, the state of the program right now, because expectations, right, are normally like if you look at like the last 15 years and you extrapolate, to the years that they had Al Golden and Matt Rule and others, the expectation was every now and then you're going to have an 8 to 9 win season, right, and compete for a conference championship. I don't know that those expectations, I think, have been tampered a little bit. So because those expectations have been brought down, my expectation is you're making a bowl game at least every other year, at least. Okay. And in the first 2 years, you might not make a bowl game, and that's fine. Okay. But then I would anticipate years 3 and 4 that program gets significantly better. Giving it an A minus. He's going to exceed expectations there. I really do. And he might not coach there for over a decade, right? Because he is 65 years old. This is a damn good hire. It's a damn good fit. I'm excited to see these Temple Owls play some good football in the American and challenge, some of these other teams that have these coaches that are successful, and some programs that there's a power grab right now in the American, and it's kind of captured right now by, I guess, this year a little bit Army, but Tulane and Memphis really kind of have, and East Carolina as a program resources wise, right? So I would like to see Temple get their nose in there a little bit.
Without a doubt. I'll be a little bit lower. I'll B plus, which is still a super high grade. A minus
Yeah,
is a big time grade. Do not take that lightly at all. If you're, a Temple fan, obviously, if they do struggle at all, absolutely blame Matthew for being way too high on Casey Keeler.
obviously.
No, but the reality is, the one thing that holds me back is this roster, right? And the realities of being at Temple. And obviously, we talked about they have resources, they have fit, they have buy-in, they also have geography that helps. Obviously, all helps. But we also know that sometimes too, like if you can't get yourself into a room because you don't have a paycheck or a checking account that's not big enough to get you in any room that you want to be in, right? That puts you back. It's hard. It's just when you're playing with your left hand tied behind your back, you could struggle. And obviously, I know Case Keeler's no stranger to that, right? What he dealt with at Delaware, what he dealt with at Sam Houston State, but that's my one drawback in terms of why I don't think this is an absolute, slam dunk, absolute booming hire. Obviously, if you are getting a guy with the pedigree of Casey Keeler and resume he has, also with ties and the fit too, I mean, it is fantastic. So I'll go B plus here. Obviously, not to negate anything that we talked about this past, however many minutes we've been talking about Temple football and Casey Keeler, but that's my one reservation is just a little bit concerned to see how he does flipping that roster, and if they give him time to, and if he has buy-in, when it could struggle early on, and how does he respond to that in that program. But without a doubt, this is obviously, I think, the most exciting hire. Maybe not exciting, but yeah, probably exciting, but like probably best hire, obviously, of the day. These three schools we talked about, one of the better hires of the whole cycle in general. And they nabbed him, and they did a good job getting him on board. And what he's done so far with his staff, recruiting, getting buy-in, kind of building excitement back in Iowa football is all exciting things.
That's going to do it for this round of coaching carousel. Another 3 teams up, another 3 teams down. We got a lot more to go. Make sure you guys like this content. All right, and we like to think that we're pretty thorough here. I mean, is that fair, CD? I mean, this is a better in-depth breakdown that you're going to get on most college football podcasts of any of these coaching hires. So we would appreciate it if you like the video. All right, share with your friends. Agree with us, disagree with us in the comments. Go off. All right, we don't know what we're talking about. I guess that's fine. You can tell us that all you want, and argue with us. We'll always respond. So, but yeah, we can't wait to be with you guys for the rest of this offseason. We got a lot of stuff planned. Hopefully, we'll have like coaching carousel video out like every week, and I guess we'll see how the content structure flows after that, after this month of February. But can't wait to be a part of it with you guys. So, CD, anything for us on the way out?
Yeah, you said it. Obviously, we've had a blast getting to know these coaches. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying the information that we're bringing to you guys as well. I know it's a dead time, it's a dull time right now. No college football going on. A little bit of life, because there's some NFL going on and there's Super Bowl coming up. Obviously, by the time you'll be seeing this, I bet it'll be over. And so we'll have a long time until we see football on the field in college football. But like you said, we got a lot of stuff going on. No reason not to be subscribed now, because we're going to be talking about a lot. And you don't want to miss anything this offseason for your team and for other teams that you will be watching.
We'll see y'all in the next one.